everybody, and welcome back to our experiencing of self-care. Today, we're going to take on a very interesting topic. This is one that kind of stems the history books, also to present date, with a little bit of interesting things in between. We're going to be taking a few chapters from, or a few pages from, the chapters of Dr. John Sarno, as well as James Allen, and some of the mid-century or 20th century psychiatrists, psychologists, and so on, to kind of bridge the gap between what we split ourselves into, essentially a physical version and a mental version or a spiritual version or untangible version. All right, this just meaning that there's the things about us that we can physically see and do, and there's those things about us that are not so physical in the ways of thoughts, ideas, and conclusions and beliefs and these kind of things. They ultimately do have an end outcome, but they're not necessarily things that you can touch and say are physical. Now, I think in this way of really finding this thing out, if we take a look at Dr. John Sarno's perspective of things, which is kind of the mind-body connection, meaning the mind can create issues and illnesses and circumstances that are not necessarily physical, but have a physical expression, which is quite interesting. And then if we take a look at kind of today's model of health, and we say that a thing is physical, therefore it must be dealt with physical means, we have, again, half of a picture. If we take a deeper look at things, or a more historical look at things, and we look at the perspective of, what's his name again? The perspective of Hippocrates, the founder of the medical system kind of thing, we see that there was more of a bridging of these two things, where we say a person character can have an illness, and therefore we're talking about the physical and the kind of mental or intangible things in a person. Therefore, we must say that how are we solving this challenge? If we take a look at the psychologists of the 20th century, they too would come to the conclusion that somebody's way of thinking of something can cause a mental illness. This thing, again, being a limitation to the person's expression, physical expression, or mental expression, therefore an illness, inability to be their full selves. So if we take a look at that, then we also see that there must be an intangible version of illness, and therefore the only way to deal with this thing, and the way that they dealt with it, is to have these kind of tangible, untangible things called the ego, the persona, and these kind of things that kind of represent that untangible part of a person that really does have a physical implication. So we can say that if we summarize all those things into one kind of great wisdom, we have the idea of a character. If you listen to James Allen, he'll go into the fact that a character is really accumulation of experiences based on past perspectives and feelings about a scenario. Therefore, that we're kind of pretty much picking and choosing how we see reality, and in that way we build up a character that seems to us to be the solution to the challenges that we're facing. So a person might say from a younger age that strength is most important, I want to be strong. Therefore, they'll look for strengths in all scenarios and try to embody that. And therefore, we have the growth of strength based on that person's definition. Now, and again, using this character-based model, we want to put in the physical costs of trying to create something like this. And again, I'd like to point out that the building of the character is something that's generally more hastily done and not done with as much reflection and reservation as we should take. So we're generally just trying to rise to the immediate occasion with this personality ideal, and therefore overcome that immediate challenge. In this way, we miss out a lot of the full spectrum of what, let's say, being strong really is. And therefore, we have a distance between the skills, the intangible skills that we have to be strong, and the reality of what it takes to be or to show strength in all scenarios. And this difference between the two is where I view the mental cost happens, and therefore the physical result of that cost happens. So when somebody takes on a task that they only have this much prerequisites for, but the reality is really asking for this much as a prerequisite, we have a challenge. The dissonance between the mind and the physical body being able to do this thing. So this person's placed under a pressure. And generally, life is going to show you that there's a difference with the feeling of stress or pressure or a feeling of failure or fatigue. All these kind of things are trying to point to us that we're missing something, and we're trying to take on a problem that may be a little bigger than what we currently have the ability to overcome. So in this way, somebody can point out, let's pick something that's really kind of out there and bold and can make really immediate sense. This is a prejudice or racism or looking down on somebody, taking away the humanity from that individual by saying they're less than because of their physical stature or abilities or looks. Now, when that happens, it's a very hard thing to see because it can hide behind so many other things. So somebody can be prejudiced towards somebody and other people not see it. And this person feeling the untangible part of that prejudice has a strong emotional reaction because they feel that this thing has happened to them, and they look for support by other people, and other people can't see it, and therefore they feel unvalidated for this thing, and this emotional strain is on the individual because they have not, let's say, overcome this very hard challenge to not let somebody else's opinion or perspective weigh on you, and therefore that person is placed under the stressor because it's a thing that they need to overcome, and the person equally that is causing this oppression or this hardship on the individual has been blinded to the reality that they will now miss out on all realities where compassion and understanding is needed in a scenario. So they will lose out on the warmth of life, let's call it, where the other person now has to overcome this pressure and start to see the warmth in all things, and therefore have a truer or more full understanding of what this warmth is. That is their challenge, and they have to build now the prerequisites. As long as the person is able to grow and build these prerequisites, the challenge itself will dissipate. Now, even if they're placed in a situation where racism or that kind of thing is a huge playing part, it doesn't come at the defeat of that individual. They see that it is all in ignorance and can rise above it in a way now keeping the let's say, self-efficacy in the whole scenario, and being able to see that this other person is truly suffering by missing out on the trueness of life. That is kind of the idea behind the character. So knowing that there always must be a growth element in each individual to overcome the things that we feel stressed about or feel pressure from, this only is indicating to ourselves that there's growth needed, and it is us that need to take on this growth, and therefore we should seek guidance. Now, in this concept is a whole bunch of experiences that have not been experienced, and in that way we have to seek guidance. And if we can go through this experience small steps at a time, we can really take the time to build up our character, and our character being the way that we take on the challenges of life, or the physical, non-physical version of how we take on challenges in life. In the kind of large picture of things, we want to be able to round that out and be able to put kind of a compassion and understanding, therefore using wisdom, our internal resource, and share that with others so they too can overcome this style of challenge. Now, in this way of summarizing the character, the tangible and the untangible, the physical and the spiritual kind of realms of thing, of which man is both grounded in, we see that creating more of a whole is our way to surpass these challenges. And I think if we use our model, our health model, as something that takes on that challenge of that kind of growth, we will have something that is a very long-term solution to a lot of the more acute symptoms of what we call illness in a human being. In that way, if we bring about an environment that, again, supports the human being and their growth, then we deal with a lot of the things that happen in a scenario where the person is starving in an environment that is not supportive of their health and growth, and therefore have these um, expressions of neglect or expressions of malnutrition, mentally, physically, and emotionally. We don't want those expressions, therefore, we should take on a model that's a little bit more robust in this way of building these things forward. I also want to take note in this video to say that over time we have lost certain experiences, a person going through a certain, let's say, perspective of life, and that the end outcome the end outcome of that being a more richer experience of self. Because we've lost these things, we now take on challenges where we are not equipped to take on, and therefore have a lot of negative expressions from this. In this way, we have saw the loss of community, we have saw the loss of moral perspective, we saw the loss of wisdom, we saw the loss of family, we saw the loss of personal connection to oneself, we saw the loss of self-efficacy, we saw the loss of emotion in the perspective of human understanding, and we are now seeing the mechanicalization, if you think about Eric Fromm, of the human being in a world where they are just consuming things and not enriching themselves. Whew. So that all being said, I really wanted to kind of bring about just the insight of that we need to solve for the growth of the character instead of just the negation of the pressures of the lack of the strength of character. All right, that is all for today, and hopefully you listen to this a few times and pick over the things that pop out to you, and in exploring those things you come to more of a deeper understanding of the rest of the video. All right, have a great day, and thank you very much for listening.